On 2nd and 10, Allen just trying to get him some breathing room. Football squirted out. It's picked up. Cleveland into the end zone. Denzel Ward. And the call on the field is a touchdown. Will be on the shelf in that one. And Browns fans hoping to get a little help. That pass deflected in the air. It's intercepted. Picked off by Tony Fields. And he is in for the pick six. It was Chase Winovich with the deflection.
Yes, you could say that Cleveland was having a bit of a Fields day yesterday. Maybe not so much in terms of the emphatic nature of the victory, but at least a great day for Tony Fields II. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Believeland Brits podcast with myself, Josh Henwood, as well as Sean Blundell and Owain Jones. We'll be breaking down everything from Houston yesterday as the Cleveland Browns triumphed 27-14 over the Houston Texans to go 5-7. Unfortunately, results in the AFC North did not go our way, which means our game break to the Ravens and the Bengals remains at 3. And Pittsburgh remain hot on our tails, having also beaten the Atlanta Falcons, which means that there is no game break underneath us either. So, first of all, chaps, first of all, nice to see you again. And first question, of course, is what are your initial thoughts after that game? Just your initial one-liner, Owain?
Interesting would be my one word for the game. Yeah, interesting.
Cool. Sean?
The supposed franchise quarterback is undefeated.
Wow, what a glass half full kind of guy. Yeah, I've been trying to think about this for much of the day, actually, and I think that as a Browns fan that has suffered through what we suffered 5-6 years ago, I welcome any win. You know, any win is welcome when you're a Browns fan that's gone through that, but God, it did not feel like a win yesterday. It really, really did not. Let's break down some of the stats behind yesterday's win. So, passing yards, Houston outpassed us by 201 to 130. Yes, that's right. The $230 million quarterback was defeated on passing yards by Kyle Allen. Rushing yards, Browns unshockingly dominated that 174 to 82 yards. The Browns was able to turn over the ball twice as many times as Houston, 4 times to twice. Houston was able to register the only sack of the game. Time of possession was relatively even, 32 minutes to 28 minutes. So we'll start off with the offense, chaps. I think that there was enough of a distinction between offense, defense, and special teams to run through all three of them. First of all, Deshaun Watson obviously was going to be the story of this game, and Owain, I'm going to let you have the first say on this because you've been beating this drum ever since it was first put down that Deshaun Watson was going to have the first touches against the Houston Texans. He ends up with a stat line of 131 passing yards and 21 rushing yards, 12 completions off 22 attempts, and a interception on what would have been an attempted touchdown pass. Nick Chubb gets 80 yards off 17 carries. Hunt 56 yards off 9 carries. The best receiver stat was Donovan Peoples-Jones with 44 yards and a perfect 3 catches from 3. Cooper ended up with 40 yards and something along the lines of 4 catches off 9 attempts or something like that. He definitely preferred Amari Cooper's side. But you said from the very beginning of mine that Deshaun Watson was going to find it difficult, especially early. He was going to have a lot of rust. But here's my thing to you. That was a hell of a lot more than rust yesterday.
Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? Like, I've been expecting that bad performance to happen for a long, long time. But even in my wildest dreams, I didn't think it would be that bad. Like, I didn't expect us to see 10-yard throws, dropping 5 yards short of our receivers. Like, some of those throws were really, really frightening yesterday. Like, you spoke about Kyle Allen having, out pass yarded Watson yesterday. Even after 2 years, you wouldn't really expect that, would you? I don't think.
No.
And I
Well,
know
no,
a lot.
not with the money you're paying. Not with the money you're paying him, because you take it. It was the argument I was making to you, is that you don't pay a guy that kind of money and expect too much rust. You expect him to be able to make the. I mean, some of those passes I could do. It was 3-yard passes even that were hitting the floor.
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't expecting it to be that bad. I've been pounding the drum for a long time that, a lot more goes into sport than just ability, and you can't just walk out on the field and, if you were the best player 2 years ago and nothing had happened in that 2 years, you're probably not going to be the best player on the field in 2 years' time, let alone, all the stuff mentally that's gone on in his head. So, I think some people had some unrealistic expectations when it came to yesterday. I do agree with you. I think it was worse than what even I thought it was going to be. My missus came into the room at one point and asked, like, how much we were losing by, which I think tells you the story about how my reaction was watching it, because it was a tough watch. We played.
It was.
People are saying, like, yeah, we won the game by what, 15 odd point. I can't remember what the final score was.
13-point win.
13 points. That was the Texans that literally, Miami made it look a little bit closer, in the second half the week before. But that could have been 60 points if Miami kept their foot on the pedal that week against Houston. So that is a terrible, terrible team. So I don't want to get too negative, because we've just won a game of football. We've kept our player hopes alive. But I think there's a lot of fool's gold in yesterday. And it was concerning as it pertains to our chances of doing anything this season, I think.
Yeah, let's go to our resident optimist here, Shaun. Now, I imagine that there was a hell of a lot of sarcasm in your line there, to a degree, in terms of your glass half full remark there, saying that the quarterback is undefeated, etc. Now, you were a bit more on it, because I think that you were more in my camp to say that there had to be a reason as to why we couldn't have expected that much rust. He got a lot of the off-season snaps. He's been, at every opportunity, he's been able to take those first team reps and all the rest of it. Where are you standing at? Are you worried not just for the end of this season, but potentially even next?
No, I think, look, let's wait and see what next week brings. I don't think we should be jumping to any massive conclusions. I think there was a really significant play, I think third offensive play of the game, where David Bell went down and ultimately he never came back. If you actually look at some of the snap counts from yesterday and you look at some of the offensive personnel that were out there, Demetric Felton was the most used running back yesterday, which, was a real surprise, but he played 60% of the snaps. Now, a lot of that was as the third wide receiver, because essentially, like I say, David Bell went down. Anthony Schwartz then fumbles the next opportunity when he was given the chance to be the third wide receiver. So ultimately, we didn't really play with much in terms of wide receivers yesterday. Tight end position also disappointing yesterday. Outside of David Njoku, these are a few games now that Harrison Bryant's had as the de facto tight end one, and just not really involved at all yesterday. Got a nice end around for the one play that Jacoby Brissett was in for. It was a bit of a trick play, so to speak, bit of misdirection, but ultimately a really non-existent game. Pharaoh Brown again was in for the vast majority of the snaps at the tight end position. He's not going to frighten anybody. So look, I'm not making excuses for some of the poor throws. Like you say, some of them were into the ground. They were really disappointing. That even a couple of them that people managed to hang on to. I think of one in particular with Kareem Hunt, that it should have been a really routine, simple throw over the middle, and Hunt was basically down picking it up off his toes. So there was certainly a lot of rust there. I was actually quite encouraged by some of the things I was seeing, though, in terms of some of the RPOs and the little wrinkles that were in the offense. I think you can imagine what it might look like if things do click and things start to go well. I think he certainly adds that dimension. There was a particularly nice one that actually got brought back on a holding call. I think DPJ was flagged for holding on one. And it's those kind of wrinkles that are now going to be brought into the offense that will ultimately make it, like I say, a much more difficult offense to defend. But it was just a really scrappy game yesterday, wasn't it? The tone was kind of set really on that first drive, wasn't it? We got the ball on a short field after an absolute dream start to proceedings, which was nearly an absolute disaster of a start to proceedings because it should have been a big play for the Texans.
It should have.
But ultimately ended up as a turnover. And, what did we do? Go 3 and out, and two difficult, chances, if you like, but one to Cooper where the defender was in close. And then, like I said, the throw to David Bell was low. And, it kind of just really set the tone for the whole day, really. So it was a difficult watch on the offense, but I'm not overly concerned at this moment in time. I think ultimately, as we said last week, even if we would have been sitting here at 8-3 or something of those kind of numbers, this change was always going to be made regardless. And I think it was pretty much shut down straight away in the post-match press conference, wasn't it? That Deshaun is now the starter, and that's it. So, let's hope it was nothing more than a bit of rust. As much as people can get reps in the preseason and as much as people can get reps in training, there's no, replica for real live game action, is there? There's nothing like that environment. It's a bit like the World Cup at the minute, isn't it? I'm sure Japan have practiced penalties all week, and then when they got to the penalty spot this afternoon, they were absolutely bloody hopeless because there's no way you can replicate that environment, is there? So hopefully nothing more than a bit of ring rust. And I'd expect to see a big leap forward this week, and we'll wait and see whether that does transpire. But I also think, like I say, just on that offensive personnel side, do bear that in mind when we're actually sort of analysing it yesterday, because it really was a bit of a threadbare attack, to say the least, particularly with some of the usage, because, like you say, just very, very strange when you look at it that, the snap counts were what they were.
Yeah, I think that I think that there is something to be said for the fact that we were playing Houston. There was an understanding that we could do enough with the run in order to break it down, but then we would never actually do enough on offense. Stupidly enough, this is the first game in Browns franchise history where we've scored 3 touchdowns or more, and none of them have come from offensive plays. So you had 2 defensive scores, and then also Donovan Peoples-Jones's punt return touchdown. It's the first time that's ever happened in Browns franchise history. And it seemed that as a team, as soon as we got ahead, of which seemed to take forever, but as soon as we got ahead, it never seemed in doubt that we were going to win. It was more of a case of, just how difficult were we going to make it for ourselves? And it turns out that it was a case of trying to strangle the game by running more than anything else. And I'm unsure whether or not that was Stefanski looking to protect Deshaun Watson as much as possible, because there's no way in normal circumstances you only give Deshaun Watson 22 throws. I don't see how that works. Jacoby Brissett has had more than 22 throws in every single one of his games for us. So there has to be something else going on there. But yeah, it was just an odd game. Like you say, Demetric Felton was out there a lot as well. There was a lot of use of, I think Pharaoh Brown got a reception as well. Harrison Bryant was out there a lot, but never really used as a passing threat. He was only targeted once and he caught it, as you say, Shaun. So, there was a lot of strange things on offense. And in terms of the defense, as we now turn around, to talk about that. Tony Fields definitely had a day yesterday. If you look at that stat line, so he got a touchdown off a interception. He also forced a fumble, of which Denzel Ward picked up for a touchdown as well. So Tony Fields was directly involved in 14 points yesterday. It's 14 more than Deshaun Watson, if anyone's keeping count. And he also had a pass deflected as well. So, Tony Fields is the franchise quarterback this week with that stat line. Denzel Ward also had a day with that touchdown from the fumble recovery, as well as 3 tackles. John Johnson with that early interception, of which, it was a gift more than anything else. I think it's very telling, and I think that Owain, you more than anyone who's been on John Johnson watch. Actually, no, it's Shaun. You've been on John Johnson watch, haven't you? Actually, no, I think the whole podcast has. So John Johnson watch, he came up with probably the easiest gift of interceptions, and after that, he didn't make a single tackle. So that will tell you what it is there. Greg Newsome actually led the tackles yesterday with 4. But I think that's also telling as well. Owain, I'll come back to you on this. For all the good that it looks like on paper, the defense kind of regressed yesterday when you look at the simple stuff. There was a lot of missed tackles. There was a lot of allowing Houston to play in front of them. Pierce seemed to do what he wanted to a certain point until they had to abandon the run. If you play like that against the Bengals and the Ravens, we're going to have a tough time.
I think yesterday was what they envisioned for this defense in a way, but against a terrible quarterback. I think, they've gone into this season obviously wanting to score so many points that the teams have to abandon the run, so then they can get after the passer a little bit more, be aggressive, and all the investment in the secondary they've had over the last few years can get them these turnovers, can get them stops, and get the offense the ball back. So I think in a weird way, that's what they wanted their defense to be this start of this season. But you can't. It's tough to really view that performance yesterday in any sort of context because Kyle Allen was so bad. Like, he sailed so many balls yesterday. And to be honest, there was a lot of these throws, they had open receivers. We talked about that John Johnson pick at the start of the game. Really good play call, I thought, to take a shot there on the first play of the game. He was wide open. Like, that should have been a big play for the Texans. Terrible throw, and bad throw, not terrible, bad throw. And then, fortunately John Johnson comes up with the interception. But I think it's tough to put your finger on how good the defense was yesterday. Like you said, some of the run stuff was coming back to haunt them at times yesterday. I thought the goal line stand in the first or second quarter where Delpit knocked the ball away, Clowney got some pressure. I thought that was huge at that moment because we were 5-0 down. Offense looked terrible. We needed that ball back. And I thought that was a really good play from Delpit, who, we've given a lot of criticism on this podcast, and rightly so. But to be fair to him, he's stacking a few decent weeks on top of each other last sort of month or so, which is nice to see. Still a young player with a lot of talent. So, we're all hoping he figures it out as much stick as we've given him this year. And like I said, rightly so. We're all pulling for him to come through this and be a better player.
Of course we are. Of course we are. We wouldn't be Browns fans otherwise, but we got to be a little depressing.
It's nice to see. One thing I wanted to touch on as well. I think Alex Wright actually finished our 4th highest graded player on the team yesterday, which, I think he got an 81 grade on PFF, which is really nice to see because past Clowney and Garrett, we all know that pass rush unit is not the greatest. And we need to see development from Alex Wright relatively quickly. So to see him taking a stride yesterday was nice to see, and hopefully he can take that into games against better tackles and better players in the future.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. I did see that there was a lot more rotation yesterday in terms of the defensive ends. Myles Garrett had a lot more time on the sidelines. There was also particular mention from Aditi Kinkabwala about that shoulder injury that is causing some distress to him, and said that it will for the entirety of the season until they can get it looked at in the off season. So that is a concern. Yeah, so that's pretty much the defense. And I just want to give a shout out to special teams. Shaun, when was the last time that we actually did something memorable in the return game on special teams? Donovan Peoples-Jones with was that a 60-yard return or something like that? So you got that. And here's another note, and something which I'd like you to comment on. We've all been calling for the special teams coordinator, the name escapes me as of right this very moment, of which doesn't bode well. But calling for his head, or for him to at least be reviewed. Was the switch of Donovan Peoples-Jones to go back into the return game something which is going to save his bacon?
I'd be very surprised if it saves his bacon. We'll wait and see. But I think the special teams would probably need to play like this for the next 6 weeks for him to have any chance of saving his bacon. To be honest, I think that ship has probably sailed. But we shall see. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones has shown flashes for the last couple of weeks that he was just a fraction away from breaking a big one. And this one was, 76 yards it actually was, meant to give you the exact number, 76 yards for the touchdown. It looked like he was going to fall over on several occasions, but somehow managed to actually maintain his balance. So that was really good to see. I think, the changes in the last couple of weeks since Jerome Ford has come back. Jerome Ford has looked reasonable on kickoff returns. Didn't have his greatest day there yesterday, but he has shown a little bit of a spark in the last few weeks. And like I say, certainly that move with DPJ has certainly proved dividends. I thought the special teams overall yesterday were pretty good in terms of from the offensive side of things. Cage York was perfect yesterday. Again, another player that we'll criticise when it's right to criticise, but he was perfect yesterday. And all the kicks didn't look like they were in any danger of missing. There was not one that I can recall that just scraped through. They were all good, true kicks. I thought Bajorquez was huge in terms of his leg yesterday. His net punting for yesterday was 51.8, and that's net.
That's ridiculous.
That's pretty phenomenal. The only thing I would say is it was just some of the coverage in terms of the returns. I think Desmond King returned one for 50 from a kickoff.
Yeah.
Which obviously a bit disappointing. But like I say, overall, special teams. We've said in close games, special teams can and often is the difference maker. It's nice to be on the right side of that. And, ultimately, what happened after that Donovan Peoples-Jones punt return is generally the kicks became more directional, which obviously means they don't carry as much distance. So, you're gaining field position that way, aren't you? So, overall, like I say, it was a much improved performance from them. Like I say, it'll be a wait and see in terms of whether anything, sort of develops in terms of this becoming more of a familiar pattern now, or whether this was just a bit of a flash in the pan because, we've seen far too often special teams breakdowns, and that's what I say. I'd be very surprised if it ultimately ends up saving Prefa's position. But we'll, like I say, we'll certainly take it when it falls our way. Just quickly for me, mate, on the defense. I thought yesterday was quite interesting again in terms of some of the snaps and the distribution. You mentioned Tony Fields. Obviously, he'll show up in terms of the flash plays, and you've obviously put him up there on the graphic. It'll be interesting because I think there are a few plays, if you watch it, that, he was certainly out of position. And ultimately he's been on the squad now for a couple of years. This is really the first time I can recall seeing him with, some significant game action. And obviously with the unfortunate injuries to Sione Takitaki, we're down yet another linebacker. It may well be that Tony Fields sees more time. Already interesting to see him out snapping Dion Jones. I think that swing has certainly been a miss, in terms of, that trade with the Falcons. I don't think that's proved to be anywhere near as successful, even in terms of it being a sticking plaster as the team hoped it might have been. So he's already out snapping him there. So we'll wait and see. I thought the other thing that was interesting yesterday was there was a lot more Greg Newsome and a lot less Martin Emerson yesterday,
Yes.
which was very interesting to see, considering all the plaudits that had come in the week prior. And I know we had this debate last week, and Owain was right to point out that the end result wasn't necessarily because of perfect coverage all the time. There were a few bad throws from Brady last week and all of those type of things. But really interesting to see a lot more of Greg Newsome this week. He and Denzel Ward played 56 snaps apiece compared to just 37 for Emerson.
I got to be honest.
Keep an eye on.
I got to be honest. I like that. To go into this season, I hated the fact that we were putting Newsome into the slot, and it was because that's such a the slot's an important position in the NFL, but it's a lot less valuable than an outside corner. And if you look at why the Browns drafted Newsome in the first place, they drafted him with a view to sequencing his contract with Denzel's. Okay, so when Denzel gets a little bit too old or too expensive and Newsome's getting to the end of his first contract, Newsome gets paid, Ward gets moved on. That's just the way it is. So why, after a really successful first season, I thought, from Newsome last year, why we wanted to move him then into a less valuable position never made any sense to me at all. Now, that's ended up being an okay decision in terms of Emerson's come on and been really good and surprised a hell of a lot of people, including me. But it still doesn't make sense to me now, because you've got 3 legitimate starting corners on the outside, and then no one really that capable of playing in the slot. I think Newsome did some stuff yesterday, by the way, that I thought was much better. Like the break he made on the ball, he's done that a few times this season now, where the wide receiver goes on an out route, Newsome, awareness to see the route, jumps it. He should have taken that for a touchdown yesterday, but just to get the PBU, great play. I just confused about why we decided to do that now, because going forward, Denzel's still on a lot of money going forward. He's not really tradable. Newsome, second-year player, you don't want to trade him away. And then that means you're either putting Newsome or Emerson on the bench when you're not in nickel or dime. So it's still a confusing move for me from the summer.
Maybe that is the issue. If you've got 3 bona fide starters, if you've got one guy who goes up and says, I don't want to sit on the bench when you've not got me on the outside, I can play slots. The Browns seem like the kind of organization that would lick their lips at that and go, fantastic, off you go, kid, because we don't have a legitimate slot corner, of which means that if they can get someone who wants to learn the versatility, they will trade off some of the they'll trade off some of the utility in order to get that happen. If they're able to finally start mixing and matching it properly so that he still gets his outside reps, especially on reps that are important, then where he can be effective and impactful, maybe that's the best way of using him. But if it's a case of trying to get it so that all 3 can be on the field because they are all athletic guys that can do stuff, we haven't had an issue at corner where we've had too many healthy, good corners of late. I'm pretty sure that the Browns organization is there going, one of you guys is supposed to be injured by now. One of you guys is always injured by now. And it's not really been an issue this year.
Yeah, you could be right. And I'm not saying that it's ended up a bad decision, because now you have 3 corners capable of, locking down opposition wide receivers on the outside. The process of it was a little bit confusing to me. Yeah. The way they went into it is what I'm trying to say. Especially
I totally get that. Emerson maybe just showed too much in training in the summer, and they probably surprised by it. That's all I can think of.
Going forward and looking into the draft next year, I think this could be you have to draft corners relatively early for the most part. I know this season's been a little bit of an anomaly in the fact that, Seahawks got Tyreek Woolen, I think, in the 4th round, and he's one of the leaders in interceptions this year, and he's played really well. We got Emerson in the 3rd. There's another one that I'm blanking on at the minute. The Patriots getting Jonathan Jones, and I think they got him in the 4th as well. So, but normally after draft corners relatively early. So the one positive you can think of is we're probably not going to have to look a corner this year. We haven't got a 1st round pick anyway. Our 2nd round pick for me has to be on a wide receiver this year. And I think this game, listeners of this pod are going to hear me bashing that drum this year that we have to draft a wide receiver with our 2nd round pick. Remember this game. When I'm going on and on and on about it in the off season, remember this game, because how badly did we need an extra wide receiver in this game? Because like we said, we end up with Felton taking real meaningful snaps for the majority of the game. So at least
meaningful slaps.
At least going back to corner, we don't need to look at one of them this year, I don't think.
No, you definitely need to look at value, especially when you don't have a 1st round pick. And I don't think that we're going to be trading up into the 1st round for anybody. So, I'd agree with you there. A good quality wide receiver is probably what this draft class is all about, really, in the 2nd round as well. I'm sure that we're not the only suitors for such a position at that pick.
Definitely.
Just a quick one before we pop onto the Bengals game. Chris, who does send in messages from time to time, just asking in terms of the return game, is King Grant under contract next year? I've just taken a look, and apparently you're shaking your head, Owain. He is until 2024, I believe.
But I don't expect him to be back. If you listen to our good friend of the pod, I'm sure we'll have him on at some point, Jack Duffin, I think. All indications are that this was pretty much a 1-year deal, and we don't really expect him to be back next year.
That's gutting. So you've heard it there. I've got him down as 324, but the wheeling and dealing of the league is such a kaleidoscope that could very, very well be true. So let's get on then to Pastures New and our friends over in Cincinnati. We obviously have quite a good record against Cincinnati in recent times, of which is something to look out for, I would say, in this game. I'm always one that's more optimistic than pessimistic against the Bengals, no matter how good they've gotten or how where their luck is currently shining. This is where I've asked you guys to give me a point each this week, and we'll start with you, Shaun, on continuing to be Burrow's kryptonite.
Yeah, you've just said it yourself there, mate. He's never beaten the Cleveland Browns as of yet. Obviously, I'm not disputing he's one of the best, certainly best young quarterbacks in the league. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of people that'll have you believing he's already one of the best quarterbacks in the league, regardless of his age. He obviously played very well in the win over the Chiefs yesterday. But don't forget, we're only talking 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago that the Cleveland Browns' best performance of the season was an absolute annihilation of the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
Now, yes, you could potentially argue they're playing better in recent weeks. And like I say, certainly yesterday's win against the Chiefs was a bit of a statement. I don't think there's any doubt about that whatsoever. But we've just talked there about the corners and the Browns, haven't we, in terms of what they sort of can all do and collectively between them. We talked about this matchup previously, didn't we, about T. Higgins. He's a good matchup for Martin Emerson. You've obviously got Denzel Ward fit. You've obviously got Greg Newsome back healthy, playing well. When you look at the Bengals, they're big three weapons, if you like, in terms of Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. We match up well against them. So there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. I'd be more concerned about Samar J.P. Ryan, to be honest. I think it's one of those that, again, Joe Mixon's had plenty of big day against the Browns in the past. Whether he'll go or not this week, we'll wait and see. But P. Ryan has certainly come in and has done well. for them, in the limited action that he's had over the last couple of weeks. He rushed for over 100 yesterday. So he would factor in to be, a really important piece in that jigsaw. But I just think, like I say, that these trends, these things, they sort of almost become problematic in their own right, don't they? That all of a sudden, everyone has this bogey team that it doesn't matter how well we're playing or how good recent form is. Whenever we play these, we just never seem to be able to get over the line. So for me, continue to be that problem. Obviously it was interesting, as you said, to see the rotation at defensive end last week. The Bengals' offensive line again has probably played better in recent weeks. I think there were certainly some issues at the start of the season, but I think it's come together as they've obviously played more regularly. Burrow doesn't seem to be running for his life as much as he was at the start of the season. But I think the Browns know how to beat the Bengals. And I'd imagine that, this is very much, a game that they're looking forward to. I think, as you said, it's one of those that you don't dread this game as much as the Bengals will be heavy favourites, I would guess, in terms of with the bookies and all of that kind of stuff. I'd imagine they're probably quite heavily favoured. But I think it's a game that the Browns have certainly got a chance of winning based on, the previous records. I think we've done the double over them in the last 2 or 3 seasons, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, it's going back a while now since the Bengals tasted victory.
I believe it's 5 games in a row that we've beaten the Bengals. I think that's the line currently. Personally, I absolutely agree. We have seen, especially defensively, we just seem to match up against a Joe Burrow-led Bengals team and have them and it seems to defy sense. On this podcast, all we have done is trash the defense this year. Maybe outside of the corners, everybody else has been fair game, but everything just seems to work against Cincinnati. Owain, do you want to jump in on this one? Because I imagine that you might have something quite different to say on this in particular.
To be honest, I don't put as much value into previous history as some other people, is how I would probably say.
Just not a romantic. Hates the FA Cup.
I just don't think past record has too much to account for in games like this. I think, me and you both had a little bit of money on the Bengals. Well, you had a lot more money on the Chiefs last night than I did.
Yeah.
But, that gave me a reason to stay up and watch that game last night. And I thought the Bengals were really impressive. On offense, they threw the ball pretty much, at will. Like, whenever they wanted to throw the ball to a wide receiver, the wide receiver was open and Burrow was hitting them. The run game looked pretty good. I know they didn't put up a hell of a lot of points, but I thought the offense was really impressive. And I think the defense did enough, especially with that forced fumble on Kelsey, that they managed to get over the line. So I think they're a really, really dangerous team. I do agree that our defense does match up pretty well to them. You look at the skill set of Jamar Chase, similar to Denzel Ward's skill set, similar, physical attributes. Same with T. Higgins, Martin Emerson, similar physical attributes. We saw that obviously the first time they met. And Tyler Boyd, doesn't necessarily scare me a hell of a lot going up against Greg Newsome either. But one thing I think is massively different between the first time we met and next week. We didn't have to worry about Jamar Chase last time. I don't think, did we? Was he available? No, he weren't available to them last time. So that's massive, because that affects how many players we can have in the box for me next week. Bengals have 3 wide receivers. They can spread it right out. And that's why Samaje Perine has been having so much joy over the last few weeks. So I worry, especially with the linebackers we're going to have next week, I worry against light boxes what that Bengals run game is going to do to us, and how that's going to affect the game on that side of the ball.
I like how you think it's going to matter as to how many we put up in the box on the run game. we could have all 11, or we could have like 2, and they'll do the exact same thing against us.
Yeah, you say that, but the last few weeks, barring like little bits here and there, I know Tampa Bay busted off a couple of decent runs, but the more players we had in the box against them, the more effective we were against them. The couple of weeks beforehand, the only game that really sticks out to us, to me anyway, that we really struggled against the run in the last, month or so. I know we had little bits against the Texans, but was the Dolphins game. But again, that is sort of what I'm trying to say. The Dolphins spread us out with those amazing wide receivers, and Jeff Wilson goes ham on us because we haven't got enough players in the box. That's sort of what the Bengals can do to us. So that does worry me. I will be keeping an eye on Joe Mixon and some RJ Pirines rushing totals over this week.
I get that. I get that. I'd say that the concern over Pirine was matched with Mixon last time. In any case, there is something to say about having to handle Chase, but we've just spoken earlier about the fact that we've got that we've got 3 very capable corners as well. I want to see us doing what we did against them in the first game, where we play man against them a lot more. We trust our corners to make the plays. They have been trusted to make those plays against these wide receivers and have won more times than they've lost. I want to see that confidence come out of them. But no, I can definitely understand the other side of that, because it's always a worry. The Bengals offense is a great offense. It's just the fact that, just based on what we see, as Shaun says, it was only a month ago, that, they were locked down essentially.
Yeah, and a month ago, I was just looking back at the box score from that game. They only actually rushed for 36 yards on that game.
Yeah, it was that one where where that couple had Mixon to run 75 yards and he didn't get it.
Yeah,
for the like $500,000 or something stupid bet.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was obviously to do with the game script at the time, and obviously you could argue that they abandoned the run, but I mean, just coming back to for me, why it's a case of continue to be that kryptonite. I probably do put more emphasis on past things, but if you look at the 4 games that Burrow has played, he's been sacked 17 times in those 4 games. This is a matchup that our defense, Myles Garrett just, he must rub his hands together and off he goes, because he always seems to have a big game against the Bengals. 17 sacks in 5 games. He's thrown just 8 touchdowns against 4 interceptions. He's fumbled the ball 7 times. These things surely become something that starts playing into his head as well, because he'll know that he hasn't beaten the Cleveland Browns yet. And obviously with it being a divisional game, the Battle of Ohio and all the rest of it, that's something that he's got a bit of a monkey on his back that he obviously wants to get right. And look, the last 2 games that he's played, he's lost 41-16 and he's lost 32-13. They haven't been close games either, the games that Burrow has played. And he would have had that fabulous wide receiver call last year in terms of Chase and Higgins and all the rest of it. And as much as, they absolutely could well win this game and could well win it convincingly, I just think, like I say, we have really just got to keep, believing in the fact that we do match up well against them. And ultimately, let's put it this way. If we lose this week, in all likelihood, it's our season over, in terms of any outside remote possibilities of playoff runs and all the rest of it. The Bengals can afford to lose a game. They obviously don't want to, but they can probably afford to lose this one. It wouldn't end their season. So there's probably more riding on it for us as well in terms of that. So maybe that'll play a factor as well.
Yeah, I tell you what, let's jump on to the next point. Owain, this is yours. In terms of how to survive the jungle, Deshaun Watson very, very obviously is going to have to recover from that debut.
Yeah, I think picking up on something Shaun said there works quite nicely with my point. I think you look at last season, the Bengals did have those 3 wide receivers against us, but one thing we did do in that game was score a bunch of points. I think it would be really naive of us to think that we can play the same way on offense as what we did this week and be anywhere near the Bengals next week. I'd expect the Bengals to put up at least mid-20 in the range of points next week. I think that's quite fair. Watson's going to have to play a lot better. I don't think we didn't see a ton of signs of him improving throughout the game. But one thing I would say to sort of give any hope for next week regarding Watson was, to me, he looked really scared of taking sacks early on. I don't know about what he looked like to you, but I thought every time that he was under pressure, he looked nervous about getting hit.
Oh, he was shit scared. Shit scared.
Which is partly for me why he threw the interception in the first place, because two come off the edge. He's trying to look off a safety. The pressure's coming in his face, and he just throws it. He just throws it to get away from that sack. But to be fair to him, I think in the second half, once he maybe got hit once or twice, I think he was more calm under pressure. He looked as if he was prepared to stay in there and get hit, once or twice. So I think next week, now that he's taken a few hits, maybe, once the pressure comes, which it will come, Trey Hendrickson's a really good pass rusher for them. The interior defensive line played really well last night as well. So I think we will see a little bit of an improvement next week. Whether we see what we need to see to win us the game, I'm not sure. But I do think we will see an improvement next week. We need to see an improvement next week if we're going to keep it close. And especially, I touched on their interior defensive line last night. I thought they were really impressive last night, which, if they put more players in the box next week, which Houston kind of did, they didn't stop the run brilliantly, but they did put more players in the box again yesterday. If the Bengals do that next week and take away a run game, we have no choice other than maybe to throw the ball 40 times next week and really, give Watson, what we signed him for, and that's to put the team on his back and throw us to a victory. And Baker, to his credit, did do that a couple of seasons ago against the Bengals away. I think we're going to need to see it from Watson this week. To be honest, I don't know about you two. If he doesn't go out and do it next week, it doesn't really affect how I view things going forward. I still don't expect him to be all that great next week. I think we'll see a little improvement. I don't expect him to go and set the world on fire next week.
No, it's too short a time frame, really. From some of the, you've just identified there, shit scared under pressure, throwing balls off quickly, throwing balls into the ground, seemingly unable to get the ball out of his hands when he's on the move. These are not quick things to fix. The only possible way that we see a complete change is if it turns out that it was all a ruse. Was it all a ruse that they were just going to be able to get by off the skin of their teeth in order to, give the Bengals a false sense of satisfaction, be able to fill the box, and then Deshaun Watson decides to throw 2 or 3 over the top of the defense just to take us to a quick 21-0 lead.
Funny enough, I know you're joking about that, but I do think there's a little bit of credence to it. I think in Stefanski's first season, he definitely kept a few plays for the end of the season when he knew we were going to need it. In games that we were expected to win and that we won comfortably, he shut the game down in the second half, which, annoys the hell out of me. But what that did do...
Typical Stefanski, continue.
Yeah, what that did do was allow him to save some stuff in his playbook that he then used when we needed it. And I do think there's elements to what we saw against the Texans where, even first half when we were 1 score ahead, you kind of knew that game was done because they weren't good enough to hang, any sort of points on us. So I do probably think that he kept quite a lot under his belt for this game, where we really need to win. So as much as you joke about it, I wouldn't actually be all that surprised if we see a couple of elaborate shot plays in the first half next week.
Yeah, I think the difference there is we're talking about, the elevation of the game book, of the playbook, instead of being able to change your hand mechanics in a week.
No, I agree.
Yeah, mine's more that it's just so deliberate. I guess this doesn't really bring me onto my point, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. So I'm just looking at the time and thinking, yeah, we probably need to start wrapping this up. So my point being that we need to dominate early. The way in which we've beaten the Bengals well in the past is to, do something on defense early, lock them down, dominate on offense afterwards, get that first score, even if it's a case of just Stefanski getting that first drive in the book, get it all the way down, score in the way in which he's been able to do really well with Jacoby Brissett. If we can do that with Watson, let's say that the Bengals start first, we get 7-0 and then get them to punt again. That would be enough for me to be able to set the tone against the Bengals. What's worked really well for us is setting the tone, because the Bengals do not like playing from, especially from 2 scores down. I've never really seen a Bengals team that has been, comfortable in doing that outside of really good teams, outside of Kansas, Tennessee, etc. They've been able to do that, but against the likes of Cleveland, where that's been asked of Joe Burrow a couple of times, at least, he's just not been able to do it. So, if Watson is to have pulled the wool over my eyes, I really want him to be able to, completely dispel the myths early doors and, get in their face early and get a score in. So Chris has actually put here, so leading is going to be key. Yes, it really is. We need to lead from the front. We need to lead all the way through, because if you give them a chance to go a couple of scores up, I don't see Watson in his current state doing what Baker Mayfield did in Cincinnati. Was it last year? Or was it the year before?
He beat them
No,
last
it was the year before, wasn't it?
It was the year before, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say the DPGA in with seconds to go. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. Yeah, so I don't see Watson being able to do that, for example, where it's a second half comeback. So that is how to survive the jungle. So some predictions. I think I know which way that these are going to lean, mainly because I did the slides for this. But,
I was about to say.
Yeah, I can't exactly get around that, can I? But I think that just the general chat anyway, I think that everyone knows how this is going to go. So, Owain, you've gone for 27-14 to the Bengals. I think that just from what you've said, it's quite obvious as to why. Shaun and myself have both gone for narrow victories to the Browns. We are romantics. We believe in division rivals being a thing. We believe in runs being a thing.
I would
Browns
love
have got it
to,
on lock, haven't they, Shaun?
At the end of the season, I would love to go back over our predictions week by week and see if we were close. I know you two are drinking the Kool-Aid every week.
So, put it this way. Last week, I got 1 point away. I said 28-14, and it ended up being 27-14. So I was pretty happy with that one. But seeing as you've been more we'll call it the realist. I don't like calling you a pessimist. We'll call you a realist. You've been far more of a realist when it comes to this, and realism has ruled the day, as it were, this season. So, yeah, I think that if we did that experiment, mate, you'd come out on top. But to be expected, especially from someone who's ranked. What's your current rank on NFL Pick'ems?
I was up to 3rd at one point this week. I think I'm maybe down to 4th or 5th.
4. Listen to it, Jesus. Meanwhile, after my lofty heights of about 50th, I'm now 760th. Just chasing far too much now. That's the problem. You've gotten that far ahead of me. I'm now just swinging for fences and I'm just not hitting. Bloody Chicago. We'll quickly run through our pick sixes. There are 3 games where we disagree this week, chaps. So whoever's the odd one out, I'll ask you to defend your stance. So Raiders, Rams, Eagles, Giants, and Dolphins, Chargers. We all went for the away teams actually. So the Raiders, the Eagles, and the Dolphins. Vikings at Lions. Owain's gone for the Lions. Defend yourself, Owain.
This was a really, really close one for me. I think home field advantage just about swung it for me. I don't think the Vikings are as good as their record actually tells us they are. And Jameson Williams coming back for the Lions. Their offense looked really good the other day. This one might come back to bite me on the ass, I think. But I'm in a position now where I'm like 3 points off top of that Pick'ems league. I need, I'm like you. I'm chasing that top guy. And I need a couple of...
You're only 2 points off him, aren't you? You're 2 points off him with 5,
but that means
6 weeks to go.
Yeah, but listen, I've made some predictions over the last few weeks that a lot of people would have laughed at beforehand, and they've come up with the goods. So,
yeah, very, very, very
tough.
true. Look, I wanted a reason. That's a good enough reason for me. Bucks at 49ers.
One to read.
Bucks
so
at
is Kirk Cousins,
49ers.
to be fair. They're the same person.
Now, Sean, did you do this one before realizing the extent of Jimmy Garoppolo's injury?
No. And I'll make the same selection again. I think the 49ers defense have played as well as anybody in the last few weeks. I think the Bucs have looked really, really pedestrian on offense. Don't forget the last time we saw the Bucs, they were beaten by a team called the Cleveland Browns. So, I'm not got any confidence really in what the Bucs are doing offensively. I think the 49ers proved yesterday, that, to be honest, and this is what we said at the start of the season in terms of Jimmy Garoppolo being a really good fit there. It's all about the scheme. It's all about, that Kyle Shanahan scheme. And I don't think it needs a particularly special quarterback to play it. And for what it's worth, I actually thought that Brock Purdy, when he came in, looked really quite good. I think he got a command of the offense. I think he played, reasonably well. Christian McCaffrey looks a real big part of the offense all of a sudden. I just really like what the 49ers are doing at the minute, and I think they'll have too much for the Bucs, particularly at home.
What if it's Baker Mayfield taking the snaps in San Francisco?
Oh, then it's definitely the Bucs. Definitely the Bucs. we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. Interesting point that you bring up, because obviously the news is sort of broke today, isn't it, that he's going to be released. Obviously bad for us in terms of that trade, because obviously we were relying on him playing a certain number of snaps for it to be around higher and all the rest of it. But I mean, what a fall from grace that's been. What an absolute fall from grace that's been. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he does end up at the 49ers. But like I say, even if it is Baker Mayfield, to be honest, I just said there, I don't think the quarterback's the real difference maker in that scheme. I think as long as it's reasonably competent play, I think they'll have enough for the Bucs.
I think someone will claim him before it gets to the Niners, to be honest. I think like a team like... Yeah, I think a team like the Texans or something like that just put a claim in for him and kick the tires for a few weeks. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing for a team like the Texans to lose, is there? So, or even like I've heard little things. Will the Niners rivals put in a claim for him first, just to stop him from going to the
stop
Niners?
him?
Yeah, which is an interesting thing to think about, isn't it?
That is. That really is. And I guess that he wouldn't actually carry the money anymore, would he?
I think they have to pay him the base salary, I believe. So I'm not sure how much that is.
So I think that they ended up cutting it right down. I think that technically the contract was restructured. So I don't think it's that much of a hit. The last one here, Owain, it's another one for you to defend. I could never defend the Arizona Cardinals with or without Kyler Murray. So you're definitely going to have to do it, pal. You've got the Arizona Cardinals beating the New England Patriots.
Yeah, this is another tough one, but the Patriots are awful. I know the Cards aren't much better, but the Patriots are really, really bad.
Please
Cardinals
read that, as the Arizona Cardinals are also awful, but continue.
Yeah, they are also awful, but I just have Murray, like his escapability, Hopkins. I think I listen to the PFF forecast quite a lot when it comes to betting, and they've been pounding the table over the last few weeks. That the Patriots have been really bad this season at defending like out and out number one wide receivers, which is quite unusual for Bill Belichick. But if you look back at this season, players like Diggs, Tyreek Hill, and there's another one, Justin Jefferson, sorry, have had massive, massive games against the New England Patriots. So I'd expect D-Hop to have a big game coming off a bye. They may be getting a little bit healthier. I don't know if Rondale Moore will play. But yeah, again, it's just a little bit of going against the grain, and I really don't believe in that Patriots offense at all.
No, that's fair. Everyone who's still in the league, please do continue to put in your pickings. I know it's a little disheartening to have Owain just so far ahead of everyone in the league, but who knows? He could get hit by a bus tomorrow and not be able to make his picks, which means that the league's still up for grabs.
That is some way to put some bad voodoo on me to stop me winning the pickings.
Hey, look, if every team I pick for the last 4 or 5 weeks gets hit by a bus with 2 minutes to go, I'm pretty sure that I can just put out any kind of vibes I want, knowing that it's not going to happen. It'll be me hit by the bus. But just keep putting in your picks, because you never know. I might swing for one too many fences. There we go. Do you prefer that one?
Yeah. And that's pretty possible, to be fair.
Yeah, please don't get hit by a bus. Very, very last thing. So we've just gone over the hour mark, but Shaun, you said something on the WhatsApp chat last night that resonated with me so much, because I thought the exact same thing. Now, for those of you that are watching that are watching this via video rather than listening to us, you'll be able to see this in all its glory. But for those of you who are on audio, I'll explain it. We're looking specifically at the Houston Texans end zone. Why, oh why, do they not just fill in the color all the way to the lines? I don't understand it. In fact, I hate it. It doesn't make any sense. Shaun, I know that you were big on this, man. I mean, can you think of any reason why? Do you hate it? Like, am I maybe overhyping this a bit? But I absolutely detest this.
I just detest it, mate. Because I mean, the reason that it was brought up was the Nick Chubb being stopped for the safety. Because it just, to me, it just feels really strange, because you sort of get out of that coloured area and you sort of think, well, I'm out of the end zone, and then it's like, well, actually, you've got another yard to go. It just seems really bonkers. I think the worst one is the Los Angeles one. And that's even worse. And I know it's just like because of the sort of the way that it blends into the rest of the stadium or whatever. But that one just feels even worse. And they often obviously they rotate that between the Chargers and the Rams. So it's just I just find it bonkers, mate. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a massive thing, but it's just a minor irritation. I just don't know why they do it.
I know. I was thinking the same yesterday, mate. Terrible. In other Browns news, of which I've been able to get up on Twitter whilst we've been on the show, Sione Takitaki has been confirmed to have had a torn ACL, so he'll be out for the rest of the season. Prayers up to him as he begins his recovery. Also, the week 15 game against the Baltimore Ravens has been moved. It's been flexed to the Saturday evening slot. So for us, that will be Saturday, the 17th of December at 9:25, of which we seem to get almost every year, and it is by far the best time slot going. Like, it is the best time slot that you could possibly have. And I'm thinking it is that is the night before the World Cup final, isn't it? Which means that we could actually watch the World Cup final in peace.
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously, Owain's delighted that he'll be able to get to watch England in the World Cup final on the Sunday now as well, weren't he? So, marvellous.
Oh, we were so close. We've had 1 hour and 5 minutes of this podcast, and we didn't mention it once. Owain, just don't listen to him. Don't listen to him.
I'm not going to bite.
Please do not bite. No, we love all of our we love all of our English and Welsh friends equally on this podcast.
Just quickly, it's got nothing to do with the England-Wales game. Since we're on Bark and Matt, did either of you notice the throw hold?
The picture they put up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do we know
you know what? That was
another
one I was thinking about. No, not a clue. If anyone could please let us know on Twitter at Believeland Brit as to who on earth the picture that they put up for Froholt was during that. I'll see if I can go back and find the picture of it on the broadcast, because that was actually insane. I was there thinking, that's not him, surely. And I started thinking, have I just had a different have I just had a different person in my head? And then they put him through to the camera, and it's like, no, completely different person. Madness. Madness. He looked like a wide receiver on the picture as well. Like, definitely a weapon player rather than a lineman. Oh, ridiculous. Anyway, that is us today at the Believeland Brit podcast. Thank you very much for watching, tuning in, engaging. Remember, you can follow us at Believeland Brit. Also, find us on Facebook. Just search for Believeland Brit podcast. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., please do like and subscribe. Trust me, it really does matter, especially when I saw our Spotify Wrapped the other day. Really looking forward to how that looks like next year when we have a few more episodes in the books. So please do continue to watch, listen, all the rest of it. We really do appreciate it here at the podcast. Until next week will not be a Monday podcast, just as an FYI. Christmas party dues are getting in the way of that. So we'll let you know via the Twitter, the Facebook, and whatever else as to when that will be. But for now, keep it at... Oh, no, I've completely messed that. I was going to say keep it at the full 10 yards there, thinking I was hosting the full 10 yards podcast, but also do listen to that. We're about to jump on and do that show over at the full 10 yards. But for now, go Browns.